The Shadow of Gravenhold, The Price of Vengeance. Chapter 1. The Whisper of Shadows. The tavern was dimly lit, its air thick with the stench of stale ale and unwashed bodies. Haldric sat in the far corner, hood drawn low over his scarred face, a tankard of untouched mead before him. The flames in the hearth crackled, casting flickering shadows that seemed alive, whispering secrets only he could hear. His eyes, like cold steel, scanned the room as his ears caught fragments of drunken conversation. "Another village gone, nothing left but ash," slurred a broad-shouldered man with a jagged scar across his cheek. "It's no bandits," another chimed in, voice barely above a whisper. "Something darker. They say a shadow moves through the woods, taking lives in its wake." The words gripped Haldric's chest like a vice. He set the tankard down with deliberate care and leaned closer, letting the din of the tavern drown out his pounding heart. The shadow they spoke of stirred a memory he had tried for years to bury, a demon with eyes like molten gold and a voice that promised ruin. It had been over a decade since that cursed night. Haldric had been young then, brash and untrained, seeking glory as a fledgling hunter. He'd found the demon, or rather, it had found him. His failure had cost him everything: his wife, Eliza, and their infant daughter, Lyra. The demon, meaning to show a mere human his place, had taken them in a storm of fire and blood, leaving him broken and hollow. The memory burned in his mind as he rose from his seat. The tavern fell silent for a moment, patrons casting wary glances at the towering figure cloaked in black. Without a word, he threw a few coins onto the table and strode into the night. The whispers followed him into the cold, moonlit street. Haldric paused under the flickering light of a lone torch. The night air was sharp, biting at his exposed skin. He stared down to the empty street, the sounds of the tavern receding behind him. Every shadow seemed to shift, pulling at his memories, drawing him deeper into his own despair. For years he had wandered aimlessly, a hunter with no prey, or perhaps no will to find it. But now, the faint whisper of purpose stirred within him again. If the demon had returned, if it had not been vanquished as he had thought, then perhaps he could end it this time. Or perhaps it would end him. Either way, he would face it. Gravenhold, that was where they said the shadow lingered. He would go there, not as a savior, but as a man seeking an end to his torment. Chapter 2. The Path of Ash. The road to Gravenhold was treacherous, winding through dense forests where the trees loomed like silent sentinels. Haldric traveled alone, his hand never straying far from the hilt of his longsword. The weapon was unremarkable at first glance, its blade nicked and worn, but it was forged with silver, a hunter's blade. The first sign of trouble came at dusk. Smoke curled into the sky ahead, faint but unmistakable. Haldric quickened his pace, his boots crunching over frost-hardened earth. The village of Braylock lay in ruins, its once thriving streets reduced to smoldering rubble. Corpses littered the ground, their faces frozen in expressions of terror. He knelt beside a young boy no older than 10. The body was cold, but the wounds were fresh. The stench of sulfur lingered in the air. Haldric's jaw tightened as he rose, his gaze sweeping the desolation. He knew this was no ordinary raid. The houses had been scorched to their very foundations, yet there were no tracks leading in or out of the village, no signs of looting. It was as if the destruction had come from nowhere, a phantom storm that left no survivors. He moved through the ruins, his senses heightened, searching for anything that might explain the carnage. In the center of the village square, he found a strange sigil burned into the earth. The lines were jagged, chaotic, yet they formed an unmistakable shape, a serpent devouring the sun. Haldric crouched beside it, his fingers tracing the charred edges. It was a mark he had seen before, a sign of the demon Azrael. "You came back," a voice rasped behind him. Haldric turned, hand on his sword. An old man stood in the shadows, his face gaunt and hollow. "Back?" Haldric repeated, his voice low and edged with suspicion. "The demon," the man said, eyes wide with fear. "It waits in Gravenhold. just as it did before. The words struck like a hammer blow. Haldric's mind reeled, but he forced himself to stay composed. What do you know of it? Enough to know you'll need more than steel, the man replied. The witch of Brackenmere sent me to seek you. She'll show you the way. The man stepped closer, his bony hand clutching at Haldric's arm. Beware, hunter, he whispered. Azrael is no ordinary foe. It knows your fears, your failures. It will make you relive them. Haldric pulled away, his expression grim. I've lived with them long enough, he said to himself. Without another word, he turned toward the road. The image of the sigil burned into his mind. Chapter 3. The Witch of Brackenmere. The Witch of Brackenmere was a recluse, dwelling in a crooked hut deep within the marshes. Haldric found her surrounded by gnarled roots and fetid water, her pale face framed by wild silver hair. Her eyes, green as emeralds, that looked too young for the old figure, regarded him with unsettling intensity. You reek of vengeance, she said, her voice like wind through dead leaves. And you reek of lies. Haldric shot back. But I'm told you can help. She chuckled, a sound that sent shivers down his spine. Help? You seek to slay a demon, yet you carry the weight of your own. Tell me, hunter, what price will you pay for your vengeance? Haldric hesitated. The witch stepped closer, her bony finger tracing the scar on his cheek. You've already lost everything, she whispered. Are you prepared to lose yourself? Tell me what I need to know, he growled. She nodded, her expression turning grave. The demon's name is Azrael. Names have power, hunter. Speak it, and it will know you. To banish it, you must wield more than steel. Take this. She handed him a small vial filled with the shimmering silver liquid. What is it? He asked. A fragment of its essence. Seeing his confusion, the witch gestured toward a collection of blackened bones arranged in a macabre display on a shelf. When Azrael first entered this realm, I trapped it briefly within a binding circle. It was young then, arrogant and careless. I captured a fragment of its shadow before it broke free. The price was significant. She held up her left hand, revealing fingers that ended in twisted, scarred stumps. It took part of me as payment. Her voice softened, her tone almost wistful. That essence is tied to it, like a thread to a needle. Use it wisely, or it will unravel more than you intend. Haldric nodded, slipping the vial into his pouch. What else? Beware the memories it will use against you, she said. Demons like Azrael feast on pain. It will twist your past, make you doubt yourself. But remember this. You are not the same man you were. Chapter 4. The Shadow Within. Gravenhold was a ghost town, its streets choked with ash and silence. The air was heavy, the sky darkened by storm clouds. Haldric's every step echoed as he approached the crumbling chapel at the heart of the village. He felt the demon before he saw it, an oppressive weight pressing down on his chest. Azrael emerged from the shadows, its form shifting and insubstantial. Golden eyes burned with malevolent intelligence as it regarded Haldric with a twisted smile. You've returned, it hissed. Come to fail me again? Haldric drew his blade, the silver catching the dim light. Not this time. Azrael moved first, its form blurring with unnatural speed. Shadows surged toward Haldric, claws ripping through the air as he barely managed to parry. Each strike of his blade seemed to meet not flesh, but smoke and malice, the demon's form dispersing and reforming with every blow. You cannot kill what you cannot see, Azrael mocked, its voice echoing from all directions. Haldric's breaths came ragged as the fight dragged on. The weight of the demon's presence bore down on him, and the chapel walls seemed to close in, the very shadows conspiring to overwhelm him. Azrael's attacks grew more vicious, its laughter a constant reminder of its control over the battlefield. Do you think they would forgive you? Azrael whispered, its voice soft yet cutting. The room around them shifted, warping into a scene from Haldric's past. He saw Eliza and Lara, their faces etched with sorrow, flames licking at the edges of their forms. "You let them die, Hunter, and now you fight for what, redemption?" Haldric stumbled, the vision pulling at his resolve. His sword arm faltered, and the shadows closed in, Azrael's form towering above him. "You are nothing but a failure," it snarled, raising a claw to strike the final blow. "No," Haldric growled, his voice steady despite the despair clawing at his heart. "Not this time." He reached for the vial, the witch's words guiding his actions. Uncorking it, he hurled the silver liquid into the air, its contents catching the dim light as it arced toward the demon. The liquid sizzled upon contact, forcing Azrael to recoil, its form writhing as the essence bound it in place. "What have you done?" Azrael screeched, its voice rising in panic. Haldric began the incantation, his voice firm and unwavering despite the chaos around him. The chapel shook, the shadows recoiling as the words of the ritual grew louder. Azrael thrashed, its form shrinking as the spell took hold, the silver liquid anchoring it to the mortal plane long enough for the banishment to take effect. With a final cry, the demon's form collapsed inward, consumed by the light of the ritual. The air grew still, the oppressive weight lifting as Azrael was torn from existence. Haldric sank to his knees, exhaustion threatening to overtake him. The chapel, now silent, seemed almost peaceful. Yet as he rose and looked around, he knew this peace would not last forever. Demons left scars, both on the land and on the soul. He made his way to the center of the chapel, marking the spot where Azrael had fallen. From his pouch, he withdrew a small wooden horse, a toy he had intended Lyra to have but never had the chance to give, and placed it on the ground as a tribute. The storm outside had begun to clear, the first rays of dawn piercing through the broken windows. Haldric stepped into the light, his steps heavy yet resolute. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, he felt the faint stirrings of hope. Chapter 5. A New Light. The sun rose over Gravenhold, casting light on the ruins. Haldric stood amidst the silence, his body battered but alive. The weight he had carried for so long felt lighter, though the scars of his loss remained. As he turned to leave, he spotted a single wildflower growing amidst the ash. He knelt, plucking it with care. It was a small thing, but it reminded him of Eliza's garden, of a time when life had held meaning. As he tucked the wildflower into his belt, a strange sensation coursed through him. His fingers trembled, and a faint mist began to rise from his skin. He froze, realization dawning as the witch's words echoed in his mind. "Are you prepared to lose yourself?" The price. The essence he had used to banish Azrael had tied his own to the demon. With Azrael destroyed, his connection to the mortal plane unraveled. The mist thickened, curling around him as his body grew faint, translucent. Haldric closed his eyes, a faint smile touching his lips. The weight of his past lifted completely, replaced by a profound peace. For the first time in years, he thought of Eliza and Lyra without pain, only warmth. The wildflower fell to the ground as his form dissolved into the mist, carried on the wind toward the rising sun. And as the light grew stronger, the ruins of Gravenhold seemed a little less shadowed, as if his sacrifice had brought a new dawn not only to himself, but to the land. If you've enjoyed this story and would like to hear some more, do let us know in the comments below. And also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps us a lot. Thanks.